What made you go, screw this, I quit? Story 1. Was getting screamed at in a meeting by some marketing jerk who was literally demanding my technical group perform magic on a completely unrealistic time schedule with almost no resources, literally screaming at me in front of about 8 of my peers, calling me incompetent, just do your job, and all of that. I stood up, said I refused to be talked to like that, and left the meeting. Normally, if you just get up and leave these types of meetings, you're fired. Boss scheduled a meeting with me later in the afternoon after hearing about it. Figured I'd be walked out. Was told they fired the marketing guy. That was my F it I quit moment, but the company kept me on and fired the other guy. Pretty happy. It's been a solid place to work ever since. Similar, but not quite the same. Working on a project years back had put in countless 100-hour weeks to make this happen. Kept listening to program management that this is really a go this time, only to be told after hours of work that we had to hold off, time after time. I was new at the company, but I straight up said I wanted 3 days of testing at our supplier before I trusted the data enough to do anything at our site. A few days later, I was overruled and had to update our systems on a Friday afternoon since the PM didn't want to lose a weekend of testing. 75% of the way through updating 50-something servers, a colleague ran in. "Stop, we're not starting today. Just heard it on a call with the supplier, they found an issue. I don't know the details, but I left the meeting to tell you." Twitch. We had a colleague from our MFG site overseas who I was training. I just looked at him and told him to ungracefully power down all the system, and we'll deal with the fallout on Monday. All this time, my boss was in a meeting in a conference room right behind my cube. My overseas colleague was sharing my cube. We spent the next hour just looking at things he could do in the area over the weekend and making plans to grab drinks. He seemed a bit weird that we were just browsing the web on company time. I was manic. I didn't care. At that point, I was Pete from Office Space. The PM showed up at my cube. "Anything I can help with?" "Well, this is unusual." "Nah, we're good." "You sure?" "Yep, have a good weekend." Boss's meeting got out and I just walked into the room before it had even cleared out and plunked my ass in a seat next to him and reclined. It wasn't even 3:30. "I'm leaving. Have a good weekend." Totally expected to be told to pack up my desk. He said, "Enjoy." It was a rainy Friday, but as I walked outside and for the drive home, the sun came out. I swear I've never been that manic in my life. I had a crap-eating grin on my face the whole way home. I made a great steak and got drunk AF that night. Come Monday? Whatever. I had a boss one time who used to yell non-stop. I mean, face turned beet red and spit flying everywhere, cursing and insulting workers. If one person made a mistake, he would gather the whole group of workers whose tasks were similar, just so we all witnessed the rage. He even gathered a group of workers once on a day when the one he was flipping out on called in sick. Still did his yelling, and the guy wasn't even there. Albeit, I think the boss was under a lot of heat from the owner, but as a manager/boss, a trait you should have is the ability to keep your composure, because as a manager, your job will have stressful times every now and then. 90% of managers aren't really cut out for the job. Story 2. My mom's. I was studying overseas and my parents booked a trip to come out at the end of the school term, bringing along my 2 siblings, one who lived away from home, the other about to start college. It was a month-long trip with lots of prepaid flights, trains, and hotels, plus it would likely be the last big trip we all took together. Obviously, both my parents requested and secured approved PTO months in advance. It was the month of June, a typical summer vacation. A couple of days before the trip was to happen, my mom's boss handed her an assignment. Mom handed it back, saying she couldn't take it on as she had a month-long vacation about to start. My folks don't believe in hyperbole, but the trip of a lifetime would be a fair description. The boss says, "Oh yeah, sorry, you can't take your vacation anymore." Mom says, "If you cancel my PTO, I quit." Boss, blank stare. Mom handed in her notice and left. We had an amazing trip and she got a new job in return. Similar story, my mom booked a trip for me and my older sister to go to France to visit my other sister who was studying there. The trip was in March. I worked overnight at the time, so I told my supervisor in September to tell my manager about it since I had PTO I wanted to use for it. No problem, PTO gets approved. I sign off on it. Manager signs off on it, good to go. 2 weeks before the vacation, my supervisor, who did scheduling, comes to me. Here's the conversation paraphrased. Supervisor, "Hey, I need to talk to you about your vacation. I'm having trouble finding coverage for you, so you might not be able to go." Me, having none of that, "Yeah, sorry man, the trip is already booked. flight and hotel paid for, so there's no canceling it. SV: well, if I can't find coverage, then you'll have to come in for your shifts. Me: you'll find coverage, but regardless, I'm going on that trip. It was already signed off on, and like I said, everything is already paid for, and it was not cheap. SV: I kind of need you to work with me here. Me: work with you? I gave you half a year to find coverage. It's not my fault you decided to wait until a few weeks before the trip to find coverage. One of the other supervisors, a friend of mine, confirmed that during all that time he simply never looked for coverage. SV: okay, well, I'll see what I can do. He walks away. A few nights later, he approached me. SV: hey, I have a proposition for you. How about you leave the day after the day you're leaving, or come back a day early? Me: no can do. This isn't a trip to the next state over. I'm going to Europe. I can't just change up a trip like that, especially not at this point, just over a week before leaving. SV: look, I really need you to be flexible here. Me: I was flexible by giving you almost 6 months to find coverage. You should have done it months ago, but you didn't. That's not my fault or my problem. So after that, we argued a little bit, but basically I just kept telling him it's his own fault, that he's scrambling to find coverage, and that according to our handbook, if he can't find any, then either he or my manager has to work the shifts. He eventually finds coverage and I leave for my trip. Throughout the trip, he kept emailing me about filling shifts when I got back, which obviously I ignored. When I return, he says to me something like, hey man, it wasn't easy getting those shifts covered, so I was thinking, I helped you out so much. If I have shifts I need to be covered in a pinch, can you help me out? One hand washes the other, I remember him saying that exactly. Me: what are you talking about? I don't owe you anything. I gave you ample time to cover the shifts and you waited until the last minute. You didn't help me out. I helped you out by giving you a ton of time and you didn't use it. He gets mad at me and is like, are you kidding me? Yada yada. He complains to my friend, the other supervisor, who basically tells me exactly what I told him. He couldn't accept responsibility for messing that up. He was a fool, had a bad gambling problem, weighed in excess of 500 pounds. To be fair, he was like 6'5", but still, he admitted that he was over 500 pounds. Chain smoked like crazy and had a habit of constantly borrowing money from people and never paying them back. He also smelled awful. A lot of stories about that guy. Similar situation for me and a friend. We both worked part-time as assistant managers at a laser tag facility. We both like EDM music, and Electric Zoo was happening in like September. We decided in February that we're gonna take that weekend off. We let our managers know that we're not going to be around for that weekend. Literally 7 months in advance for 3 days off. Like 2 weeks before we're supposed to leave, they book an overnight event and schedule both of us on it. Now I should mention that these tickets were $600+. Plus, we rented a nice hotel in New York City. No way in hell were we going to miss out on this trip. We both went into the manager's office, said if you keep us on this event, we're not showing up. We knew they wouldn't be able to stay afloat if they fired both of us, and we individually agreed that if one of us got fired, the other would leave as well. Like a mini union. Well, it worked. We got off the schedule the next day. Story 3. I was a truck driver working a regional route that required me to work nights. So basically, I would drive all through the night, deliver a load, sleep through the day, and take a load back to my original place the next night. The thing is, sleeping during the day at a warehouse where yard dogs, the guys that move trailers around the lot of the warehouse with little tractor deals, were constantly moving crap around, knocking into my truck, and oftentimes literally waking me up to move my truck, I was barely getting any sleep, and the only time I had to ever get a good night's rest was during the weekend. So driving to my first delivery, I told my manager I was taking an extra day off because I was exhausted and I had to get a few days of sleep. I was literally getting maybe 3 to 4 hours of solid sleep a day, and energy drinks were worthless at this point. They gave me the go-ahead. I dropped my delivery, slept as best as I could at the warehouse, and picked up the load to take back with a message from my managers telling me to have a good weekend and rest up. When I was about an hour and a half away from my destination, after driving all night for about 8 hours, reaching pure exhaustion, I got a message saying, "Never mind, we need you to work this weekend." Mind you, I know this stuff happens, and you sometimes have to pick up the slack of other employees at times. Things happen, I get it, and 99% of the time, I'm all for helping out other employees, and my managers, if they need it. But this was about the 3rd time this happened. I haven't had a good night's sleep in 3 weeks at this point, and I kept trying to call my managers or anyone who would answer me. But it was the weekend, and no one would respond to their messages or phone calls. I was literally being ignored, and I just snapped. Luckily, the demand for truckers is massive. I mean, I get texts non-stop asking if I'm in the market because a company needs drivers. I haven't even been in the industry for 2 years currently, and my phone still gets blown up with calls and texts asking if I want to drive again. So literally all I did was call one of the numbers that would contact me constantly and immediately was hired after 5 minutes of talking on the phone. Sent in a message saying I quit and good luck. Funny enough, then they started responding to my messages and tried calling me. I know it was probably a dick move to screw them over, and I normally would never do that, but I just broke, and I could not take it anymore. I've been driving for almost 2 years now, with my second and much better company now. The same thing happened to me at first. Oil-fueled hauling water, and sometimes I'd be stuck on a site with a hose attached to my truck just turning a valve off and on about once an hour, for about 17 hours a day, not including drive time. When I complained about it, I was told by the owner, "You're under oil field exemption, and you weren't driving." Then when I told the oil company man on site that WC was making drivers work illegal, I got my hours cut because the oil company limited the hours and work they gave to my water company, and my company passed that loss on to me. Not really provable as retaliation because work for the whole company dropped off a bit, and I wasn't the only one with reduced hours, even though I was the only one with 0 hours. Also, trying to get any mechanical work done was like pulling teeth. Steering had 3 inches plus a free play. Drag link was about to fall off. Drive axle hangers rusted out and loose to the point where I could roll the back drive axle by hand with the brakes engaged. Relay all that info to dispatch in the company shop. They say, "Well, drive it on down after your shift today. That's all we can do." I live and work in another state. The work sites are between 30 and 90 miles away, and the shop and HQ are 120 miles in the opposite direction. I put the truck out of service and told them I'm not driving that dangerous piece of crap all day and then some. I didn't work for a week while my truck was getting repaired. I got my truck back and talked to a yard supervisor, not a shop mechanic at all, who said he fixed the steering by pumping grease into the column and it should hold for a few days until the shop can look at my truck. They didn't even look at it for that week. I get a loaner truck and drive that for a few days. I got a call to come pick up my assigned truck. When I got there, the mechanic said, "WTF were you talking about the steering? It's fine. Feels fine." Told him about the manager doing a temporary fix. He shrugged. They didn't even look at anything else on the truck. Thought I was an idiot for putting it out of service when there were clearly no problems with it. And that's when they faced a huge lawsuit from a former employee who ended up with chemical burns over half his body. Overnight, the safety department was formed and without telling anyone in my office, started to withhold checks if we didn't fill out a daily safety form. They didn't notify me of the form or the withholding of a check. I found out when my bank called to ask why I hadn't made a mortgage payment, car payment, and overdraft fees because auto payments to cell and internet came out. So I parked right where I was when I found out, just on the outside of a fracking site that needed extra water hauled to it. I sat there and refused to move until they hand-delivered my paper check. An oil company man had to come over to ask what the hell, and then got on the phone with my company. I got the check and then turned around and drove home without delivering the load. Screw it. Felt so good to get out of that company. Was hired a couple of days later. Less BS, less hassle. Brand new trucks are under warranty and doubles. 100% better situation. Good for you. My last workplace was awful for that. I'm almost always game for extra shifts because I was paid hourly. 99% of the time, like you, I would take extras, come early, stay late. This one particular day, a Saturday in August, I got a call from my manager. I'm an hour's drive away with no vehicle close to me. I'm at a patio crawl with friends, just having some drinks and food. She tells me I need to come in because I'm the only shift supervisor available. Whoever was supposed to work the evening shift in 45 minutes couldn't show. I tell her I can't. I've had a few drinks, can't drive my car. It was parked at a friend's home where I was spending the night, and even if I was sober, I was too far away to get to work. Plus, I don't have my work gear ready or a clean uniform. She goes nuts. She says that's no excuse. She expects me there in an hour and 15 tops. Or else. I just calmly explain that the first thing I'll do Monday morning is call the labor board and let her know she's condoning impaired driving and working while under the influence of alcohol. I'm sure that will keep my job secure if she tries to fire me. I've been nothing but a solid employee. I come rain or shine, ready to work. And then she has the nerve to threaten me? What the hell? And then she tells me, "You don't even sound drunk." Good for you for sticking up to managers. I know it's hard to do because I don't like making waves or confrontation, but sometimes you have to. They need to know how you feel, and it can make them appreciate you more in the long run too. Sometimes employers just have a hard time seeing workers as human beings and not machines. Story 4. My first job. I was assigned to a specific area, and I thought I was doing my job well. On Monday, I was pulled into the office and asked why, whatever it was, I don't remember, it hadn't been done for the last 2 weeks. I replied I wasn't aware it was part of my duties. My supervisor said he was putting me on a mandatory non-paid vacation for 2 weeks. No warning, no explanation on why I all of a sudden had to do work for a different department. So I said, don't worry about it, I quit. It was a lousy job anyway. I was only getting paid 18 hours a week, but was doing more than that. 16 and stupid, I guess. Had something similar to this happen. The manager claimed to have called me to change my schedule. My phone didn't show any missed calls from his number. He was lying. And then, same day, scheduled me to work a shift that afternoon without confirming that I was free or willing to pick up the extra shift. When I came into my next shift, he asked why I didn't come in for my scheduled shifts, showing me my work schedule that he'd printed out. I told him I hadn't been scheduled for that shift, showed him the screenshot of my original posted schedule from 2 days after it had been officially posted that showed I hadn't been scheduled for that day. And he said it was fine, smiled and nodded, and sent me back to my shift. Next week's schedule comes out, I have no shifts. I ask what's up, and he says that since I missed a shift and didn't call in to say I'd be missing, I had to lose 2 weeks of hours. I again asked why that would be happening if I had come in for my scheduled hours, reminding him we had talked about it and he had said it was fine. He pretended that he didn't remember that conversation. He was absolutely shocked when I quit before the 2 weeks were over. I got a voicemail 3 days later asking why I didn't show up to my scheduled shifts that week, and when I called him back asking what about, I got a new job and will not be back, was unclear. He claimed that he had never called me or left a voicemail and I must have just been confused. Yeah, sure, some guy with your voice took your phone, called my number, claimed to be you, and used my name in the voicemail mentioning my new job and confusion over my new schedule to benefit who? To accomplish what? That manager got let go a few weeks later. Found out he had been pulling the same crap with other employees. They erased his name from the front of the building and everything. A lot of places tend to hire kids because they know they don't know anything and are banking on them not wanting to get in trouble and just knuckling under. This happened to me at my first 2 on-the-books jobs, and if it wasn't for the second place getting a new manager who actually knew employment law and how deep of crap the store would have been in for what I had been doing as a teenage employee, I never would have known different. Actually, that manager was in awe during her first few weeks, as she learned more and more about what our old manager had us doing and how all of it was so very, very illegal and unethical. She really was a gem to us. It was nice. Story 5. I worked for a group home. We had a difficult group of residents, but the company made things so much worse. Every resident was 14 to 22 years old. They had moderate mental development delays, 65 to 75 IQ range. They all had a psychiatric disorder from severe ADHD to schizophrenia, and they had also been convicted of a violent sexual crime. I worked the third shift. My normal hours were 10:30 p.m. to 9 a.m., 4 days a week. About 6 months into working there, they did a massive layoff. They went down to the bare minimum staff-to-student ratio each shift, with nobody extra to call in if needed. That meant if someone called out, a person on the previous shift was forced. It got to the point where I was being forced 3 out of 4 shifts per week, and not just a few hours. I was working from 10:30 p.m. to around 4:30 p.m. the next day, and still had to come in for my following shift. I had an hour's commute each way, so I'd get home at 5:30 p.m. from a 16-hour shift and have to leave again 4 hours later. Managed that for a month. Then one morning I was told at the last minute I was being forced. Told them I was done and walked out. That month took a huge toll on my mental health. Swear it took me like a year to recover. I did community care working with the elderly. Lovely bunch of clients. Absolute gems, some of whom I'm still in contact with. But the company was the worst I've ever worked for. I would start at 6 a.m., so would have to be up at 5 a.m. as I lived half an hour away from the area I worked in. I would then work through to 2 p.m., have an hour break where I would have some dinner and a quick nap in my car. I would then start again at 3 p.m. and work through until 10 p.m. But if a client had an emergency, was being difficult, or just struggling, like most elderly folk do at the end of the day, it could be as late as 11:30 p.m., which more often than not it was. It was then a half-hour drive back home to get back up at 5 a.m. I wasn't eating well. I was barely sleeping and would have to shower at half noon. I did it for 3 months, doing 12 days in a row, and one day fell asleep behind the wheel. I immediately pulled over and called my now fiance. He told me to call in sick, have a nap, and then go home. So I called my manager, and she tried to guilt me into working at the end of my shift. Never mind that I was in danger on the roads. I agreed to do the next 2 calls. I only had 2 before my break, so that the clients didn't suffer, but after that I was taking a couple of days off to rest. This bitch had the nerve to tell me that if I couldn't hack it, I wasn't cut out to care, forgetting that I'd done the exact job for another company for 2 years and had no issues before. I told her I was giving her my notice with immediate effect. I would email them so they had it in writing and would mail my uniform back to them. It will always be the worst job I ever had. Feel for you. I have a relative with mental health issues living in a care facility because he's too much to handle at home for even 2 people, and that's if they do nothing else but care for him and keep him out of trouble, which was not at all an easy task. So he's in a care home with about 10 other patients, and there's like 1 worker. If my relative can't be handled by 2 people, how the hell is 1 worker going to handle 10? With a lot of luck that everybody takes their meds and behaves. It's crazy there's not a better solution for all involved. Caring for the elderly can be rewarding if you're a really strong person. Story 6. A little Greek restaurant I worked at early in high school. Got hired and spent the first 2 days cleaning everything the owner and son were too lazy to clean. Years worth of old grease in the deep fryer's interior, mold in the fridges, stains in the bathrooms, etc. Just gross. Ask about payday at the end of the second day and it went something like this. So how does payday work here? Is it weekly? Bi-weekly? What? You are on training. If we like the job you do, we will hire you with pay. Confused, I ask, so you're saying that you're not going to pay me for cleaning years worth of mold grease and bathroom stains? No, you will be paid for work once your training is done. Oh, okay. Screw this, I quit. I worked a second job in a kitchen at a strip club for 3 whole days. It was 2 days a week, and it was just me holding down the fort, so I spent the first 2 days doing deep cleaning, same as what you described at the Greek restaurant. Years of grease and mystery goo, brushing cockroaches off the cutting boards, reorganizing the walk-in so that the open jar of marinating chicken didn't splash down onto the veggies. Come the fuck on, who puts veggies below raw chicken? Then I did shrooms on one of my days off and was sitting there blasted and just thought to myself, I can't go back there. Quit via text and worked 1 more day just to not be an a-hole. If it wasn't so gross in there, it would have been a sick job. The same thing happened to me when I was younger. I thought I was hired to be an editor for a local cable access channel. It was run out of a rich guy's compound. He gives me a laundry list of stuff to do and I get right on it. It was difficult because he had no organization and the person before me had no set procedure. He left a helpful video that basically said, fake it till you make it. I worked a few days, 8 hours a day. I asked the same question you did. How does payday work? He laughed and said, pay? For what? You haven't done anything yet. I haven't even decided you should stay. We'll talk about the contract today. I said not to worry about it and told him I'm done. He begged me to come back for days because he didn't have anyone to finish his projects. I told him to stop contacting. It bothered me that he said I hadn't done anything because I finished one of his shows and got it to air on time while still working on 2 other projects. Story 7. Worked at a Spencer's Gifts for a bit during uni. I was working and saw that I was scheduled for an evening shift the day before a morning exam, so I asked the manager if I could switch. She said no, the schedule is already made up. Went back and forth trying to negotiate with her. She ended with, you're going to have to decide what's more important, the shift or your exam. FedEx did the same thing to me. I finished packing my trucks and left for an exam at 7 a.m. Boss said someone didn't show up because they got arrested, so I need to pack their truck too. I said I had an exam and was leaving. He said, what's more important, a rewarding career with FedEx or your exam? I said the exam, and when I came back to get my last paycheck, he threw it at me and stormed off. I worked at a theater when I was briefly going to community college, and I couldn't work Thursdays because I had 2 classes that day. My one class ending at 9 p.m. The one time they ever scheduled me on a Thursday night was my midterm of all days. I called management and she kept insisting that I was scheduled, so I had to come in. I pointed out that I had Thursdays as was the day I could not work because I had class, and I had a midterm that night, and her excuse was, we had to schedule a lot of people outside their schedule, and I straight up told her I was going to my midterm, and the earliest I was going in was after I finished my midterm. I worked there for another 10 months, a year total, and hated every moment of it. Story 8. After taking a few days off work while my father was having a brain tumor removed and still checking emails and attending conference calls from the hospital, my boss gave me a new project. On a Thursday afternoon, she gave me a Monday morning deadline for a project that would take 6 to 8 days to complete. I worked 16 hours a day to get it done. When we met on Monday, she asked how my weekend was. I worked all weekend. Then she asked if I got to visit my dad in the hospital. No, I didn't get a chance because I worked all weekend. A couple of weeks later, she pulled me into a meeting and said, I feel like you were resentful because you had to work, and I feel like I was really good when your dad was sick. Maybe you're just tired. Are you tired? She'd also make comments when I would leave the office on time. Not early, on time. It's great that you just get up and go when your day is over, like I have to go because I have a daughter, but you don't have any kids and you just leave at the end of the day. Yeah, idiot, I don't live here. I don't go home and sit in a dark room counting the hours until I get to come back here. I'm also not curing cancer. Nothing we do here matters to anyone outside of here. I give you 100% when I'm here, but when my day is done, it's done. I no longer work there. Story 9. I fractured my orbital socket in an industrial accident. Another employee lost focus at the wrong time and was supposed to wait for a hand signal but didn't. We had been working over 90 days straight of 13 to 14 hour shifts and living in a crappy motel a 45-minute drive from our work site. We were supposed to be on a rotation where we didn't work for more than 3 weeks at a time. It was a close call and could have been a lot worse. I'm glad I saw it coming and had time to at least try to get out of the way. I got sent away after a night in the ER while the rest of the crew continued to work. After spending 2 or 3 days at home, the boss called to say that he needed me in Alaska in 2 days and that my flight was already booked. I told him I quit right on the spot. As I was reading this, I knew it could only be in Alaska. Some brutal work there. Story 10. Got a summer job while I was in high school at a place that made fiberglass tanks. I was told I'd be doing groundskeeping and yard work. Figured I'd scored an easy gig of bumming around on a ride-on mower and whatnot. Nope, the first day I showed up in a t-shirt and jeans. I was told the yard equipment wasn't ready, so they had me cut raw fiberglass for 8 hours with an X-Acto knife and no PPE. Being a dumb idiot kid, I didn't immediately quit and did this for 3 more days. At least after the first day, I brought my own gloves and long sleeve shirt. However, on said fated day 3 was when they were doing tank coatings. So about 10 feet away from me are 2 dudes in full PPE. We're talking coveralls, rubber gloves, glasses, face shields, and respirators. 10 feet away from me in a poorly ventilated room, spraying the exterior of a tank with presumably fiberglass coating. I only made it a few hours before having to go to the bathroom to puke. Was told to quit being a pussy and go back out on the floor. So I fortunately had a moment of not being a stupid kid and said I quit and walked home. Both parents were mad when I told them I'd quit. The joke's on them though, because a few years later that company killed 2 dudes. A guy asphyxiated while working inside one of the tanks, and the person that tried to rescue him also ended up dying. The whole place got shut down permanently. I hate companies that pull this bait and switch stuff, like you got hired to do the yard work, not cut fiberglass. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you'd like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.